Alright guys, this is Eric. Welcome to another match of Battle Tanks League. I am going to be commentating on this game, so let's get right into it with who's playing what tanks and against whom. Up at the top we have Pikabar. He is the #1 ranked player in the world, and it looks like he randomed a Raider and went basic magic. That's a pretty standard thing to do with Raiders since it is such an expensive tank that you really only have 3 options to go with at the start. Basic magic, which is the most common one, being that it's 999 range, though you can also get, I believe, a plasma ray for 1,000 gold. It has a lot more DPS, and the advantage of it is that its upgrade costs just as much as the original weapon costs, which makes it a good use of your inventory slot. However, it only has 800 range, and that makes it very hard in the beginning to get shots on your opponent. In the beginning, the dynamic is more about trying to position yourself carefully to shoot at your opponent while they cannot shoot at you, either by, let's say, it won't apply in this matchup here because EMZE is shooting back with basic magics, but let's say you have a weapon with slightly longer range than they do, you will try to stay within your range but out of their range. And that can happen pretty effectively by skilled players. The other thing that range will give you an advantage for in an early game matchup is that if you do have a confrontation with an enemy tank, it will allow you to get the first volley or 2 off if you are chasing them or they are chasing you or you are just kind of approaching each other, and that can really make a difference in early game combat. And so for that reason, the 999 range basic magic is the most common weapon if you random something like a Raider, Demolisher, or Distributor. Where you can't afford any more expensive weapons than the 1100 gold ones. I suppose there are a couple of other options. You can get the Darkness Spears for 950 range. It has slightly more DPS than the basic magic, but I think people usually opt for the faster firing and slightly longer range basic magic. Its lower damage and faster firing speed does allow it to creep more effectively, more efficiently in the early game. You're not, say you have a 20 hit point creep left, you're not going to do 170 damage to it, you're only going to do 111 damage to it. So it is a bit more efficient there. Though Darkness Spears is technically another option. It's almost never picked, though. The thing that is sometimes picked is the multi-bow. For 1100 gold, it has 160 DPS, which is the most damage per cost a weapon can have in the game at that range, and that is because it only attacks creeps. It cannot hit the enemy tank. It's very rarely picked, but sometimes players in the lane will pick it because what it does is that it allows you to farm more efficiently. You're more likely to get kills on the creeps and thus get gold for them rather than your own creeps getting kills on enemy creeps. And it can also clear creeps so effectively that your own tank cannon or future weapons that you buy will be able to fire at the enemy tank should you guys get into a skirmish. Anyways, people who play League already know this information, but people who don't play League or perhaps new to battle tanks maybe find that information useful. Anyways, we have Pikabar in the top. Like I said, he is the #1 ranked player in the world with a Raider, and he is facing up against EMZE, who randomed a light tank, and EMZE is a decent player, but not nearly as good as Pikabar, and so Pikabar randoming Raider, which is a pretty aggressive tank, it has an ability called Static Charge, which can apply pretty consistent damage to an enemy tank. This is probably going to allow Pikabar to push EMZE to this bottom tower position pretty quickly in the game, and that will create a gold advantage for Pikabar because as Pikabar's creeps approach the tower will begin taking kills from EMZE. In the fact that the tower kills the creeps rather than EMZE's own weapons. And this can exacerbate any gold advantage that Pikabar might have. So we'll get back to this matchup later. For now, it's not going to be that exciting. Raider can't be quite super aggressive yet, given that it only has 1 basic magic, though we will expect Pikabar to push this command post in the future due to his higher skill level and aggressive tank. Meanwhile, in the bottom, we have Pelmiene. He is one of the best players in the world. I believe he is top 5, going up against Hokuto, who is not quite top 5. I don't remember how good he is, but it looks like we have a mismatch in the top where we're going to expect Pikabar to push on EMZE, and the reverse in the bottom where we're going to expect the bottom team player, Pelmiene, to push on Hokuto. Hokuto did get a Scout, and one of the interesting things about Scout is that its tank cannon skill has longer range and more DPS than a normal tank cannon. However, kind of like the multi-bow, it only attacks creeps. However, the fact that it has pretty long range, it has 1050 range, and does extra DPS, usually means that Scout is the one pushing towards the enemy tower, just because it can clear out the creeps so quickly and leave space for the electro cannon to apply pressure to the enemy tank. And even if they're not getting hits on the enemy tank, just their amount of damage that they're doing to the creeps is going to allow the creep wave usually to push to the tower and having the tower start getting kills. This doesn't seem to be the case here. Pelmiene's a pretty good skilled player. He's probably going to he's going to take advantage of trying to hop in and out of this strategic location, which will provide him plus 15 hit points of regeneration per second. Hopping in and out of that will usually allow you to regenerate about 50 hit points, maybe even more than that, because what you can do is you can hop into the strategic location, hop out of it, and then, as you can see here, the effect of healing actually lasts for a few seconds after you exit it, and you saw a good demonstration of that right now with Pelmiene, who hopped into the strategic location, grabbed a healer, and then right as the healing effect of the strategic location expired, he was able to barely touch the healing zone again and get another 70 to 100 hit points. So he's probably going to take advantage of that in order to stall Hokuto's scout aggression and make sure that his creeps don't quite push into his tower. So I'm curious to see how this matchup goes. As Pelmiene is able to get more weapons than a basic magic, he will probably start pushing on Hokuto. It might force Hokuto to change tank from a scout to something that can actually deal more damage and have more aggressive abilities. Something like a helicopter or a medivac, or maybe even another distributor perhaps. Let's see what happens here. Meanwhile, in the middle, we have Gabriel as a raider who random to basic magic. That's kind of tough to get Raider as a random in the middle, just because its abilities work so much better on the side when you only have one opponent to worry about. In the middle, it's very hard to use static charge consistently on a single target. Battles in the middle tend to happen very, very quickly, whereas lane battles tend to be more long, drawn-out skirmishes that allow you to get several static charges on an opponent, as Pikabar just did onto EMZE, forcing him back to the command post. Let's see if Pikabar can push his creeps to the tower at some point soon. Anyways, so that's what Gabriel randomed, and then in the meantime we have Todd, who went a light plasma gun and then an iron hole. That's a pretty common build to see as helicopter. You can see that the light plasma gun has 950 damage, and it has 950 range, and it has 2 projectiles with 105 damage each, making it pretty efficient for creeping. One of the more common things you will actually see with helicopter is to get the light cannon instead of the whatever this was called, the light plasma gun, because the light cannon has 1,000 range. And so it's the same reason that Pikabar got a basic magic instead of the aforementioned darkness spears. The extra 50 range can actually make a difference when you're trying to carefully position yourself in the early game, so as to either shoot at the opponent without them firing back at you, or at least to get the first volley off if your teams get into a skirmish. And when you have low hit point air tanks such as helicopters and medivacs, a single volley can really make a difference. In the meantime, we have WildPants, who got a Tinker, and he went an Energy Torpedo. Energy Torpedo is an interesting weapon because it's a 1300 range weapon. 1300 range is the highest range a weapon can get in the game. However, this Energy Torpedo has the special property that it only fires every 3 1/3 seconds, but with massive damage. And so when you combine the slow firing speed, massive damage, with the long range, the dynamic that happens is that occasionally you will get pretty lucky repeated shots on an enemy tank that allows you to get pretty sneaky kills on them, or at the very least you will have enemy tanks trying to posture aggressively, trying to hit these Tinker Towers or maybe skirmish with these tanks, and all of a sudden they get hit with a 650 damage Energy Torpedo and they're at half health, and they can get pretty quickly taken out by a helicopter stun and tanks following up and firing with weapons. So that's the way Energy Torpedo kind of works. It's a pretty aggressive weapon. the way you need to respond to it is by carefully positioning yourself. We saw a good example of what the energy torpedo can do right there. It got a shot off on home, and then the team immediately teleported in to capitalize on it and finish off home, who was at half health. So that's the way energy torpedoes work. The South team has an energy torpedo of their own. However, it's not going to be that effective because the South side, they can hide amongst these Tinker Towers, which will distract the energy torpedo, provide a much reduced likelihood that the tanks themselves get fired upon as opposed to a tower or the nearby creeps. In addition to that, the energy torpedo being a 1300 range weapon that outranges these towers, it only does 10% damage to these towers. And so let's see if either of these helicopters also opted for long range. They didn't. We saw home get hit with another energy torpedo followed by a team volley from the South team. And then even this pink guy, D45, he got hit with a couple of energy torpedoes, and then Tremal got hit with an energy torpedo. So all three of the north side teammates, they've been hit with energy torpedoes, and they're having to really play carefully at their own command post. If the south team can push their creeps into these two towers, or perhaps this tower, they're going to start getting a farming advantage over the north team. And indeed, that is what is happening. The North team is losing some of these creep kills to the towers, and Home especially is losing the ability to gain experience and gold because he has already died 3 times. So it looks like the South team is so far winning this matchup, and WildPants is making, in my opinion, a good decision to stay as Tinker. And this is because the most potent weapon on the North team is Home's energy torpedo. However, as I mentioned before, and Home just died again, that is unfortunate that he is feeding. As I mentioned before, the presence of these 5 towers provide a lot of alternative targets to an energy torpedo that is in range of these tanks. And if it does hit these towers, then it does barely any damage, and so people are already commenting that Home is feeding too much. That's unfortunate. And these towers aren't going to take very much damage because the only 2 tanks that can deal effective DPS to them are these very fragile helicopters, where if they step into firing range of these towers, they're likely to take a torpedo shot and or a helicopter stun spell, and it's very dangerous from them. So it looks like the South team's winning the middle matchup. Let's go back to the bottom to see what's happening here. Pelmiene is pushing. He got an electro cannon, which is a pretty powerful weapon. It's the same weapon that the scout opened up with, and so now the distributor has almost as many hit points as the scout does, but it also has more DPS against the scout than the scout has DPS against the distributor, and it has more aggressive abilities. The distributor's Q spell can deal a lot of damage to an enemy tank in a matter of a couple of seconds if the enemy tank walks out of position. The Demolisher's, or the distributor's Q spell, fires the heat-seeking missile that just follows the closest enemy target present and deals, I think at level 1, like 150 damage, and I think that goes up by about 70 damage per level. And so he is level 8, so he likely has that spell at level 3. So his, I think his heat-seeking missiles are doing at least 300 damage, probably close to 350 damage. So he fires 3 of them off, and that's about 1,000 damage done to the scout. The scout has no comparable abilities to take out Pelmiene's distributor, and thus Pelmiene can play a lot more aggressively than the scout can. If I were Hokuto, I would probably have changed your tank, maybe to a distributor mirror, or possibly to something like a medivac or helicopter, just so that you don't have to constantly be playing at your own command post and lose kills to the tower. That kind of negates the advantage of scout in the first place, it being its creep cannon's ability to get more kills on creeps. Anyways, what's happening in the top? EMZE is able to play without getting pushed back to his command post by Pikabar. They both almost killed each other. That was a pretty close matchup there. Another basic magic hit from either of them would have killed the other person. Let's see what continues happening here, if EMZE is going to try to force Pikabar back to the command post or vice versa. Looks like EMZE is going to be the one to go back to the command post, so these creeps should be enough to forestall the North team's creeps and not let them reach the tower. But you did see EMZE did just lose a creep kill to these Marines firing upon that Zeppelin. What's happening in the middle? WildPants is still just happily sitting there as Tinker, providing a lot of support and creep DPS and just energy torpedo distraction for his 2 teammates, Todd and Gabriel. And he has 4,300 gold, which means he can sell his hull pretty soon and get a heavy tank. That might happen at 15 minutes, and that would make these 3 tanks pretty nervous. If WildPants had gone something like a Medivac or a helicopter, this team could have gone a Storm Tank. And in fact, WildPants himself could go a Storm Tank, though I would probably go Heavy Tank if I were him. That would really put pressure on not only all 3 of these tanks, it would make it very hard for them to save up. You can see D4 or 5, he has no gold. He's probably going to start saving after... Well, it looks like, okay, he's upgraded both of his light cannons and his iron hull. So he's probably going to start saving for a tank now, but it's 15 minutes and he's only going to have 1,000 gold. Meanwhile, home, he has 1,700 gold and he only has an energy torpedo and an iron hull. So unless he's saving for a tank right now, he might not get a tank very soon. And in the meantime, with just an energy torpedo, he doesn't have that much farm or much potent DPS against these tanks. Even WildPants, as a tinker, he upgraded his energy torpedo so it does 650 damage rather than 478. That does make a difference, especially when you consider the surprise factor of energy torpedo. Losing an additional 180 hit points by surprise is no joke. Todd, meanwhile, he just upgraded his other weapon, and he has a upgraded hull, so he's probably going to start saving for a tank now. And Gabriel has 3 basics upgraded and an iron hull, so he might upgrade the iron hull and then start saving for a tank. But I am going to expect WildPants to upgrade to a heavy pretty quickly. He has the gold for it now, almost. He just needs about 70 more so that he can teleport back and forth. He might be content, actually, to just stay as Tinker and then maybe farm up to a quick Hunter. Imagine a 20-minute Hunter with energy torpedo. That would really, really make these helicopters nervous. It would make it almost impossible for them to save until minute 25 or minute 30 in their state. So let's see what happens. The North team might be forced to go with suboptimal tanks, such as Tier 2 tanks, Thunder Tank, Heavy Tank, Storm Tank, Airship, rather than getting some of the more powerful tanks. Oh, we just saw a couple of good energy torpedo shots from WildPants, getting 2 kills. But I think the South team's more likely to be in a position to save for something like a Demon Tank, maybe even a Frost Robot, certainly a Hunter, possibly a Brawler. We'll see what they pick. Whereas the North team isn't going to be able to save up safely for those tanks, and so this is going to exacerbate the advantage that the middle has. One thing the middle does have to be cognizant of and be careful of is if Pikabar, being a level 10 raider, begins to push on this tower against EMZE. If Pikabar pushes on this tower, and especially if he kills this tower, the middle is going to be forced to play back and be in a position where they can readily support EMZE at this command post. What the South team does not want to happen is for Pikabar to take the command post. He didn't quite get the kill on EMZE there, but EMZE didn't die either. What they do not want is for Pikabar to take this command post and change to Ghost Tank and then begin sieging their base, all of their towers, their base, start killing their factories. It's a known strategy currently for Pikabar and a few other players when they take a command post, especially this one if they're the North team, or this one if they're the South team, to use its close location and proximity to the other team's base to siege it and start killing factories and also get armor upgrades, which supports your team in the middle. And it's very difficult for this team in the middle. I'll use actually the South team as an example since it's more relevant to this game. If Pikabar were to take over this command post, it would be very difficult for this South team to gank him from here. That's a long way to walk. They would need teleporters. Pikabar can spawn troops, and they can try to spawn here and counter their troops, but usually by the time that happens, Pikabar will have done half damage or full damage to a tower, even with an optimal response. And so they really do not want to let Pikabar take this command post from EMZE. Maybe Pikabar is playing a gentleman's agreement to not do that Ghost Tank strategy, since a lot of people on the Discord are pretty up in arms about it. They consider it overpowered currently. Nobody has really figured out an effective counter to it, other than just having your team take advantage of the mismatch in the top lane. to feed kills in the middle. That seems to be what is happening. Dark Force the South team has 10 kills to Light Force's 5. I don't think that is enough to have a net worth discrepancy between the teams to overcome a potential Pika siege from this command post. So middle does need to be careful. EMZE is holding his own for now, but should he begin to should pikabar begin to push to this command post, it's going to force this middle to play back. They do have a very good position here. WildPants with 7,300 gold. He's almost certainly going to get a hunter soon. Maybe even save and get a 25-minute frost. I would get the hunter if I were him. Start putting pressure on these tanks who are trying to save but don't really have that much gold. 3,300, 2,700, 2,600. They're probably not going to tank until minute 25. So if WildPants gets a hunter pretty soon, like in 3 seconds, then it's going to make it extremely difficult for these 3 tanks to save up properly. Alright, so on the bottom, Hokuto, he changed from a scout to a thunder tank, and he also got a teleporter. I like this strategy out of him because this means that he can hold his own against Pelmiene for now. Pelmiene is probably going to be able to save up for a better tank than what Hokuto got, but what Hokuto can do is, first of all, he can use his stun spell to gank opponents. Pikabar coming in, he bought a sky tank, and together they were able to kill Pelmiene. But what Hokuto can do with his teleporter is go into the middle and take advantage of the South team's aggressive position here to quickly teleport in, stun one of them, and then create a 4-on-3 situation against this South team. It's going to be pretty hard to do because they would be running into 5 Tinker Towers that would absorb a lot of the DPS from follow-up weapons to the abilities. But if WildPants does change tank, or even if he stays Tinker and stays relatively vulnerable, this is an option for Hokuto to do, to teleport into the middle. I think he used this teleport to get away from whoever the light tank was, EMZE. EMZE tried to come in and kill him after he and Pikabar had killed Pelmiene. He was able to use the teleporter to escape. One of the Thunder Tank's abilities is, I believe, Electro Aura, and what it does is it does DPS to all enemies within, I think it's 600 range of the enemy tank, and this makes Thunder Tank a popular choice for people to grab on the lanes early and get a teleporter after that, because the fact that they have their tank cannon and this Electro Aura ability that can both deal effective DPS to creeps allows them to invest in things such as repair packs and teleporters and play a support role on the lanes or in the middle, an aggressive middle here, to create 4-on-3 situations and get kills. And in fact, if I were Hokuto and Pikabar, I would be a little bit concerned about how your middle is faring, considering that WildPants did just get a hunter and did just get a couple of kills on these vulnerable helicopter and medivacs. They forced D45 to go a 23-minute heavy tank, which is not the most potent of tanks to get at 23 minutes. Heavy tank is very good if you can get it before 20 minutes. It's best if you can get it at something like 15 minutes because its abilities, especially once you reach level 10, do such a great amount of damage to things like vulnerable helicopters and medivacs. It makes it very hard for the enemy team to save up tanks. So I was kind of expecting WildPants to get the heavy tank at minute 15, but getting the hunter at minute 21 is also a very aggressive strategy, and it scales a bit better into the late game. So it looks like mid is winning the fight here. Pikabar might be just trying to push this tower and force the mid back. If I were Hokuto, however, I would probably be playing a bit back towards your command post. Take advantage of your Thunder Tank's stun ability and the teleporter and the speed you have to create gank situations in the middle. And oh boy, Home also went a heavy tank, so they were both forced into heavy tanks due to the presence of this hunter. In fact, the only one who did not get a heavy tank yet, Tremal, he is taking the punishment right now for his vulnerability. He can get stunned by the WildPants', the hunter's gravity grenade and take massive damage. He can also just get stunned by this helicopter here who has a lot of mobility. He can stun him, and then WildPants can follow up with the hunter's Q ability at sufficient range that can pretty much take out both of those abilities just by themselves can pretty much take out the entirety of Tremal's hit points. So he's got to be pretty careful. He only has 4,300 gold, and he could sell, I believe these are worth 1250 each, so he could sell, if he really needed to get a tank without weapons, he could sell these for 2,500, sell this for about 1,000, and sell his tank for about 500. So he could sell and get a tank worth 8,000 gold, perhaps a darkness tank, maybe soon a goblin wrecker, maybe a sky tank. Though he might try to wait until the 5-minute mark, and that way he can at least hold on to one of these light cannons, sell the other light cannon, sell the whole tinker up, and then try to get a tank from this shop here. We'll see what he gets. He's got to play very carefully for the next 30 seconds, though, until he can get a tank. All right, Todd got the Darkness tank. This synergizes pretty well with Hunter. If the Hunter is able to catch somebody in their gravity grenade, or even just their acid cloud ability, Todd can follow it up with his own ultimate, which also slows opponents down, and his Q spell, the Darkness Orb, which you just saw, was able to deal a lot of damage to D4-5. And then WildPants, of course, follows it up with his own Q spell. So Darkness tank is a very it's kind of a support tank in that its main role is disrupting enemies. It can use its ultimate to block enemy vision and greatly slow them down in a range. This can protect your tanks if enemy tanks are chasing it. It can also be used aggressively, especially if the Hunter catches opponents in the gravity grenade, and he can follow it up with his own ult to keep enemies from fleeing, while the Hunter uses an orbital strike, and he uses his own Orb of Darkness spell. We did see the heavy tank get a kill on, who was it? On Gabriel. He used his Raider teleport, but only teleported further into the heavy tank's ultimate spell. Anyways, we just saw Tremal. He got a Hunter. Almost another clip. I was literally watching that fight. Maybe I missed something. Anyways, Tremal got a Hunter with no weapons. That's pretty unfortunate. It is nice for this North team to have a Hunter to counter the South team's Hunter. However, the Hunter's tank cannon does not attack creeps. It only attacks tanks. So right now he has absolutely zero farm unless he uses a Q spell. He's just going to try to get kills on enemy tanks, but this isn't going to work. He just ran into a vulnerable position and got a bunch of spells cast on him himself. Gabriel following up with a Sky Tank. So he can do a lot of DPS if the Hunter catches enemies in their ultimate. If I were Gabriel, I'd probably, instead of going a Sky Tank, I would have gotten something like a Demon Tank or a Goblin Wrecker. Those both have very powerful stun spells that can happen at long range. And what that does is it would allow Gabriel to instigate fights, stun an opponent, allow the Hunter to follow up with an easily placed Gravity Grenade and Darkness Orb from WildPants and Todd, respectively. As of now, I think they're going to have to rely on clever use of the Darkness Tank's R spell and the Hunter's W spell to try to trap opponents and then catch them in their ultimate, so that Todd can launch his Darkness Orb, WildPants can launch his Q, and Gabriel can launch his own Q. Home just died again. Tremal almost died again. Pikabar, he has decent DPS. However, he's not going to be able to get the kill as Pelmiene comes in with a Goblin Brawler in time to give support. Indeed, he kills Tremal, who tried to get a greedy kill off and made himself vulnerable. Anyways, it does look like the South team is winning this matchup so far. One would have expected, I guess Hokuto's back at the top, one would have expected Pikabar to push more aggressively on EMZE and try to put the pressure on this tower. The fact that he was unable to do that allowed the middle to maintain their aggressive position. And now they have 3 tanks that are much more powerful and synergize better with each other than what this other team has. This other team can at least chain together stuns and deal a lot of damage with the heavy tank ultimates and the Hunter ultimate. However, they just don't have as much health. Their spells aren't quite as easily aimed, especially the heavy tank spells. They don't scale very much into the mid game, quite as well as Hunter and Darkness Tank and Sky Tank do. So it does look like the Dark Force is winning this fight at some point. this point, and meanwhile Pelmiene has a tank advantage over Hokuto, so he might be able to push this tower. However, he's got to be careful because Hokuto does have a stun spell and a teleporter, and he can receive support from anybody in the middle or pikabar. WildPants is asking for a pause. I'm wondering if he is trying to roast his teammates, or maybe come up with a game plan, or maybe chew them out for not following up properly to his ultimates. It seems like the middle, Todd and Gabriel, are doing a pretty good job. I don't know if they're referring to the ABS, the player. They're doing a pretty good job of using their skills. I've rarely seen Darkness Tank's Darkness Orbs. Oh, somebody's in the Discord, unmuted. I've rarely seen a Darkness Tank get so many kills and so much damage out of Darkness Orb from enemies that weren't even stunned, caught up in a Hunter's ultimate. He's gotten multiple kills from enemies who were just fleeing in the wrong direction. Prometheus school of running away from things, as I think CinemaSins on YouTube describes it, and they just continue to run right where the Darkness Orb is heading. Tremal is able to get a good ultimate off. However, these tanks just have too powerful abilities, and the heavy tank, it has 7,000 hit points, but that's not enough. The Hunter, even the Hunter, has 10,000 hit points. Darkness tank has 8,400, and it can ward off enemies more effectively than a heavy tank can. So this is definitely looking like advantage South team for now. And they actually moved EMZE to the bottom, perhaps to siege that tower. I've rarely seen guard used in the lane. Usually it's a middle tank to provide support and long range and an area stun. Guard is something that with which you can get orbital strike. Hunter is a tank you can get orbital strike with as well. And once again, we see the Prometheus school of running away from things on display as Home runs right towards where the Darkness tank projectile is going, and then he continues to run around when he has the Goblin Brawler R on him. I'm surprised that he didn't get taken out by the Hunter. Oh, the Hunter just showed up to kill somebody else. So far, that was 2-for-1 kill advantage for the Dark Force. Gabriel, what are you doing? Don't run back like that. You have 95 hit points. EMZE, meanwhile, is sieging the bottom base, so this tower might fall, and they don't have a ghost tank on their team to really take advantage of the siege potential here. However, it is one more command post to have, one command post closer to taking all three and sieging the enemy base. And command posts, because they spawn troops in the same way that factories do, if you take a command post, your team is going to be spawning more creeps than the enemy team, which allows your troops to push farther up this lane, and makes it harder for enemy teammates to push that command post from this position. It's a long walk, first of all, but then they have to deal a lot of damage to creeps. I should probably keep my camera on the good fight going on in the middle. A lot of skirmishing back and forth. xxTOD putting a very good Darkness ultimate in there, really disrupting the movement of Tremal and Pikabar, who is trying to ward them off. Though, as I was saying, if EMZE can take this command post, he already killed the tower to it. Even though they can't siege the base, they do get a creep advantage. Creeps can push towards the base, making this command post harder to take. And the entire South team, the Dark Force, they do get extra income every 5 minutes from the Force Gold to compensate for the lack of creeps spawning for them to kill. So basically, they're getting the gold that they would have gotten from killing the creeps, but now they don't have to worry about killing the creeps anymore. Alright, so both of the North Team's towers are gone at the side command posts and the middle command posts. So I wonder if this team is going to try to group up and just full-on assault the enemy team at a single command post, perhaps by building a laser tower and an orbital strike that missed. They're going to have to go back right now since their abilities kind of failed. Home with a really unwise ultimate. He's playing far too aggressively against tanks that could deal a lot of damage to him from short range. I think with their Hunter having the R ability, the Gravity Grenade, and the Orbital Strike, I think it's in their best interest to actually stick together as a group. At least 4 of them. They can maybe have a 5th person try to take another command post as a distraction, but have 4 of them stay here. Perhaps the Hunter, the Darkness Tank, the Brawler, and the Sky Tank here, though the Guard would be a good option to have a team fight as well, and just take advantage of the way that their abilities synergize. Have the Gravity Grenade, have the Orb of Darkness, have the Sphere of Darkness, have the Flame Strike, all dealing damage, stuns, and disruption here at this command post. And if they're able to rush in there and build even a rocket tower, but they would probably do a laser tower for the middle since it's such an unimportant command post with a proximate location to the base. That's what I would expect to happen from the South team. Indeed, if I were the North team, I would probably preemptively buy a tower or a barricade, given that it's 4-on-3 right now. The abilities are recharged. Orbital Strike goes off, Gravity Grenade goes off. They are able to get a rocket tower, and yeah, they are going to take this middle. Hokuto isn't going to be able to do enough. Actually, that's a 2-on-2. They do have the tower. Actually, they defended it better than I expected them to. EMZE, in the meantime, was taking a command post up top. They are going to be able to respond to that in time. Actually, maybe they won't. xxTOD is able to teleport in using the teleporter, and so is Pelmiene. So now they are taking the top command post. Indeed, they were able to get it. So good job, EMZE, for kind of trying to take advantage of the firefight going on in the middle to take the top command post and also build a teleporter, which the North team wasn't able to respond and kill in time. So everybody kind of teleported in, and the other team gave up. So this is a pretty quick game, only 34 minutes. But yeah, South team was pretty much dominant that entire time. They had a really tough position in the middle with these Tinker Towers and the Energy Torpedo getting a lot of kills. The middle on the North team played rather unwisely. They were taking far too many Energy Torpedo shots and feeding. And then in the meantime, pikabar was not able to provide sufficient pressure upon EMZE and this command post to force this middle to play back, or perhaps even to take this command post and start sieging the base. I think that was one of the points of failure on the North team, was pikabar's lack of dominance over EMZE, over which he has a much higher ELO, and so he was unable to capitalize on that mismatch, and the middle was able to capitalize on theirs, going up against some low-level players, and that's what really won the game. The middle was able to get far better tanks that synergized better, and that's what allowed them to put so much pressure on this command post that they were eventually able to get this one. And even if they're not able to get command posts yet, they do have a 31-13 kill ratio over the North team. I'm unable to type net worth as a referee, so I can't quite see that statistic, but this was a pretty quick game. Most games are all league games are automatically balanced based on ELO, and so most balanced games will last about an hour. The fact that this one ended after just 34 minutes is kind of an anomaly, but this was a pretty dominant performance from the South team. Anyways, this has been Eric, also known as Titan Music, commentating on this game. This is pretty fun for me to do, so I hope to do it again in the future. Titan Music out.